So today, the theme is planning your electrification transition. It's one of a series
otherwise I wouldn't.
Of energy efficiency workshops that we are putting on behalf of the Western Australian Government. And I'll explain a little bit about the Western Australian Government Switch Your Thinking Partnership in a moment. We will be covering today a little bit on what Switch Your Thinking is, just in case you're not aware of who Switch Your Thinking are, and also the energy efficiency pilot program that we're running. We will talk about why it is important to get away from fossil fuels, and give you a few stats in that respect. Also run through the benefits of getting away from gas in particular. When we're talking about homes, we'll refer more to gas, and we will be talking about, say, oil and petrol, although there will be a component in the presentation that does talk about electrifying vehicles. We will also run through what your options will be in terms of choice of appliances, the lifespan and the costs. And so comparing basically gas options with electric options that are applied to the electricity grid, and then what the costs and the greenhouse gas emissions associated with having renewable energy like solar panels and batteries as well. We will be talking about electric vehicles and fossil fuel free charging. I'll cover off on barriers and benefits to home electrification and EV home charging. And then also just a short section on what to do with end-of-life appliances. So covering off a little bit on waste and trying to minimise waste at the end of appliance life. Then I will point you in the direction of some useful resources. Some of those you may already be familiar with, and just give you a little bit of a starter on what you can do to plan a smooth transition to full electrification. There certainly, are ways of financing so you can transition very quickly. Some other people may need a bit more time, and so planning ahead is really important. So first up, just the Energy Efficiency Pilot Program is a partnership that was formed between the Government of Western Australia, the newly named Department of Energy and Economic Diversification, and Switch Your Thinking. It's the Western Australian Government's way of trying to support local governments and their residences and small to medium-sized businesses within those councils to become more energy efficient. And there are two main aspects of what we're doing this year in the pilot program, which is the provision of energy audit kits to local libraries and also community resource centres, and also provision of workshops. So this, I guess, is the first sort of stage of what we hope is an ongoing partnership with the Department of Energy and Economic Diversification to support councils, their residents and small to medium-sized businesses. If you would like to follow Switch Your Thinking a little bit more closely and find out more about the Energy Efficiency Pilot Program, please head to our website, www.switchyourthinking.com/energy. Will take you to a dedicated landing page which explains where the energy audit kits can be borrowed from, and also upcoming workshops, and also some prizes that we have linked to the program as well. And we have Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn and Instagram pages as well. Switch Your Thinking itself has been running for 23 years now. We were started within the local governments of City of Armidale, City of Gosnells and the Shire of Serpentine-Jarrahdale, essentially to support those local governments internally, the residents and businesses, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in their operations and at home and in their businesses. That generally is through a variety of energy, water and waste initiatives these days. But essentially we try to cover off on greenhouse gas emissions in every way that we can. And same again, we have a very comprehensive website which you can grab a heap of additional resources from. And we have even a rewards for residents program for our subscribing council. So we're working with 15 local governments within the Perth metropolitan area to provide discounts on a range of things like solar panels, batteries, electric vehicle chargers, hot water heat pumps, ceiling fans, lights, a whole heap of stuff. So if you're interested in having a look whether your council is part of that program, please head to switchyourthinking.com and have a look at our incentives and awards. So getting on to the content of the workshop, we're going to be looking at electrification. The first thing we need to, I suppose, try to understand is why getting away from gas in households is an important aspect of this transition. Now, 5 million households are on gas in Australia, and in Western Australia alone, about 1 million homes have still got some sort of gas connection. So if every Australian household that uses gas today went all electric, we would save more than 30 million tonnes of carbon dioxide over the next 10 years. There are, apart from the fact that we have greenhouse gas emissions being emitted due to gas appliances and gas cooking, gas heating, there are health issues, but there's also some issues in terms of it's just not an efficient way to provide energy, because 1.3% of gas is released into the air during cooking. There's methane emissions occurring through leakage as well. And so there are a variety of other health issues, which I'll cover off in a moment. The other thing is that up until now, or quite recently over the last few years, Western Australian gas supply was quite protected, and we were very lucky compared to many of the other eastern states because we had a capped or a guaranteed domestic supply. A few things changed in 2021 where the export of onshore domestic gas reserves were approved, and so that meant that we became more connected to the international market, which has driven up prices. But also coming up in about 5 years' time, there will become a supply gap of up to 191 terajoules per day predicted. So as demand or that gap in supply increases, so will prices as well. So moving to electrification is anti-inflationary. Unfortunately, those costs will be passed on to the consumer over time as well. Now, I've already sort of touched on the fact that there are a variety of health and wellbeing factors that are associated with gas use. So 12% of childhood asthma in Australia is attributed to using gas in the home, and that is a comparable risk of having a child living in a house with cigarette smoke. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that there are a variety of conditions that are very closely linked to gas use in the home, including migraines and fatigue, skin conditions, upper respiratory tract infections, asthma, cancer, blood and immunity conditions, reproductive health, and with babies, infant mortality, congenital heart defects and other birth defects, and low birth weight. So it's kind of one of those sort of hidden risks that a lot of people don't think about, and it's just another bonus for getting away from gas and moving to electrification. Now, I do not know why that is there. That should not be there. Just give me a minute. For some reason, it skipped right to the end. You get a quick look at my slides up until this point. So as I said before, if we all went all electric today, we would save 30 million tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions over the next 10 years. That is equivalent to planting and growing nearly 500 million tree seedlings for 10 years, burning about 70 million barrels of crude oil, or taking over 100 million long-haul flights from Sydney to London. So it's not a small amount of emission savings. Sometimes I think people will focus in on industry and what it is industry is contributing to, and that households are a small aspect of energy use, but collectively it is actually quite significant. So then having households actually address this issue and coming to the party on moving away from fossil fuels and going into full electrification. This includes renewable energies like solar panels and batteries in the home, is really important in achieving the global commitments. A lot of the commitments are tied in with 2050 targets of net zero. And when you think that's 25 years away, we've still got 5 million homes in Australia that are still with gas supply, then it's important that we start shifting very quickly. But this, the table on the left is actually from Rewiring Australia, and I assume that many of you may have heard of Rewiring Australia already. If you haven't, definitely look it up. It's a fantastic non-profit organisation that helps people understand and supports that move away from fossil fuels into renewable energy and also full electrification across the home. And so this just gives you a little bit of an idea on the benefits of thinking in this way. It also shows you that the vehicle emissions associated with internal combustion engine vehicles, the ones that are still predominantly on the road, are a massive contributor to carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas emissions every year. And so that really, because they are private vehicles, they come in under household energy use. If you move away from the gas appliances and petrol vehicles to vehicles that are electric vehicles and electrified appliances, but with a grid, you see a drop from 8,360 kilograms per year down to 2,388 kilograms per year. Then if you actually, just muting a couple of people here, excuse me. Then if you look at electrified appliances and vehicles with solar and battery, it drops again very significantly down to 749 kilograms of CO2 per year, which still sounds quite a bit, but when you actually look at the difference between the first column and the third column, it is profound. It's about 11 times less greenhouse gas emissions. So what does domestic electrification look like? Essentially, there are 6 main aspects of this. It requires solar panels on your roof, supported with a battery system. Unfortunately, in Western Australia and Australia now, there has been a recent introduction of battery rebates, which mean that having a home solar energy storage system battery has become viable for a lot of people, whereas even just 6 months ago, a lot of people were thinking about it. Then also having an electric car that uses that stored and renewable power, electric stovetop, heat pump unit, as in reverse cycle air conditioning, and also a heat pump hot water unit. I'd be interested to know how many of you are aware of heat pump hot water systems or already have one. I've got one and I've had it for about 3.5 years now. I'm just found it to be so fantastic, and it almost instantly cut my hot water bill, my total electricity bill down by 1/3. So we'll talk a little bit about heat pumps a little bit later. Then on the right-hand side of this screen, it sort of gives you a bit of a breakdown on what that total energy use is per day. If you're comparing a vehicle which is using fossil fuels, like an internal combustion engine vehicle, your electricity from the grid without solar. Space heating is a reasonable chunk of the pie. Space cooling actually is a lot less than the space heating, but water heating is reasonably significant, cooking and then other appliances, which totals 102 kilowatts per day. Like we said before, if you have those internal combustion engine vehicles, it is a massive aspect of household energy use. When you fully electrify a average home, you're dropping down to around about a third of the energy use. And so vehicle charging cuts down your energy use by about 40 kilowatt hours a day. And then space heating also reduced, as are the other things. So the two diagrams on the right and also the household diagram are courtesy of Rewiring Australia, and they are actually the sort of inspiration for this workshop, which we commenced running about 2 years ago now. So then in terms of the cost savings over time, there, of course, if you are looking to transition to a fully electrified home, it can be a reasonable sort of outlay to begin with. This table here shows if you were to fully electrify your household, including sort of the finance upfront with the payback periods, then your first 4 years would require some sort of cost burden, but then after 4 years, you start seeing savings. So the first year, and just bear in mind, this is from October 2021, and so since that time, these cost savings potentially are even higher. But it gives you a little bit of an idea about sort of the separation between what contributes to that cost burden and then over time where you will be finding your savings. I will share these slides with you after this session as well, so you can have a slightly bigger look at this. But after 12 or 13 years, you're saving in excess of $6,000 a year, which would fund a pretty decent holiday. The other thing about creating an energy efficient home, if you were ever looking to sell your home, Domain Group have done some work in this sort of space, and they've shown that 2/3 of home buyers prefer energy efficient homes if they're given a choice, and also the resale value is quite significantly higher when a energy efficient home is the one up for grabs. So this sort of thing is becoming more of a selling point for homes. Now, when we start breaking down the various sort of aspects of living which require energy use around the home, so we talked about the heating, the cooling, the electric vehicles, cooking, and also hot water. Then you can see in the next few slides that the choices that you make can make a considerable difference in terms of running costs. So some of these things do cost more initially to purchase, but the costs are quickly recouped from lower operational costs. So, for example, LPG heating on average, and the actual study sort of data is sort of summarised below on how these figures has been created. But LPG heating may cost $1,604 a year, compared to gas heating, that's $1,030 a year. A wood fire, $930 a year, and I'd argue that that might even be a bit higher in Western Australia now, given that we have restrictions on logging. Electric resistant heater, so your kind of bar heaters, your little fan heaters, things like that as well, extremely expensive at $1,500 a year. But then if you look at the electric heat pump, which essentially is your reverse cycle air conditioner, you see a dramatic drop into sort of that $400 a year category, and that is even less when you combine that with solar. So do bear in mind, if you are having to replace, say, an evaporative air conditioning unit in your ceiling, which is a little bit like what I've got going on at my house currently, then I would strongly recommend you have a look at replacing those with reverse cycle air conditioners in each room, because not only do they manage your cooling, needs, they also are the cheapest form of heating as well. I'm just going to quickly look at the chat because I did see a few comments come through. Okay, so I've got a question about how do heat pumps compare to solar hot water. Look, solar hot water is still a very good option, but often in winter they do need gas or electric boosting, so they're not completely free. The other thing about having solar hot water system is with them taking up some space on their roof for a solar panel to heat that water, you could be actually using the roof space to be putting in solar panels and then getting a hot water heat pump, which you can then program to be heating up during the day and then getting free hot water right through the year. So solar hot water is not a bad option, but with hot water heat pumps these days and a much more viable solar systems and battery systems, then heat pumps are usually what we recommend over solar hot water. When will electric barbecues be available? Well, I would say that they would be already out there, although I'm not 100% sure about that. I know that certainly councils have had electric barbecues in parks for a long time, so it's definitely a thing. In terms of residential homes, I'm not 100% sure. But I will look into that, John, and see if I can send you some information about that afterwards, or if you come up with some great tips on where those things can be purchased from, I'd love to know about it. So flick us an email. So Kit's just saying she's heard about a hot water heat pump as you're renting. Yeah, look, even if you're renting, it's definitely worth sort of, even talking to your landlord about those kind of things, especially if it appears that a hot water system may be quite old. And a lot of people, and that includes landlords as well, may not even know that a hot water heat pump is an option. So they may be open to it, although it will save you money, it will not save them money. So we do understand that renting can be a little bit more challenging in terms of getting these sorts of things put in. But again, landlords can be persuaded in that, the consumer or the renters themselves these days are a bit more environmentally savvy, and even though the rental market is very hot right now in terms of not a lot out there, it may become more of a selling point later on. Based on WA prices, Daniel, no, these are based on Rewiring Australia analysis. I believe it may be related to census data, so it wouldn't just be WA prices. Okay, I'll get back to the slides. So just looking at hot water now, hot water is quite a significant proportion of home electrification costs. Home energy costs. Hot water heat pumps, not the easiest thing for me to describe, but they are, in a way, if you think about how a fridge cools, so it's basically runs on a compressor, it takes the warm air from inside the fridge and replaces it with cool air. It's a little bit similar in that way, where a heat pump will take the heat from the air external to the tank. And I've got a bit of a descriptor here. The fan draws the air onto fins called an evaporator. The heat in the air is absorbed by the refrigerant, which flows through the evaporator. It's then compressed into a vapour, which raises the temperature and pressure. And hot vapour then flows through the heat exchanger, which heats the water and cools the refrigerant. Once the vapoured refrigerant has given all of its heat, it then transforms into a liquid state and is cycled up to start again. at the evaporator. You can extract heat from even near freezing air temperature. So this is not something that is only applicable in warmer climates. This would work very efficiently even in colder climates like in Tasmania. And the great thing about heat pumps in hot water systems is that for every kilowatt of energy that they need for actually powering the unit, it generates 3 kilowatts of energy in hot water energy. It's always also a bit like energy storage, so great to be using it during the day. They are programmable, so you can see this up here. Most heat pumps have like a program screen, so you can actually program to be heating up while the solar system is running at its maximum. And you can also set it at like an eco level and these sorts of things. So there are some advantages to having a heat pump that isn't possible through other hot water systems. So then if you look at, say, instantaneous gas, which is sitting at about 490 per year in an average Australian home. If you were to compare that to electric resistance, which is your standard electric hot water system, which would sit at around about $900 per year, you pair electric resistant with solar, and that does drop down to $380. But if you look at an electric heat pump, even with full grid power, no solar at all, it drops right down to $240 a year. And then an electric heat pump with solar at 85% of the energy required to run the heat pump drops down to $70 a year. So it is a massive shift in energy costs. And I've also found that I just don't run out of hot water as well. So I can't say that's got anything to do with the heat pump hot water system itself, but certainly I will never purchase anything different. So then if we look at energy efficient appliances, we've already talked about space heating, we've already talked about water heating. Then we're looking more generally about other appliances, cooking, lighting, space cooling around the home. As I said before, it is generally more expensive to be purchasing energy efficient appliances, but the benefit is when you operate them, and say an appliance might have a life of 7 to 15 years, maybe more, then that is where the real cost savings come into play. When you're thinking about replacing appliances, first up, you want to be choosing a suitably sized appliance. So there's no point having a massive fridge if you're just a household of 2 people. And same thing again, there's no point having 2 fridges if really one only suffices. We will run through the energy rating calculator, which is available on a website, which can help you understand the cost of certain appliances and also their energy rating and their running costs over a 10-year period. So doing research ahead of time is a really good way to sort of avoid those higher running costs over the life of an appliance. With this, you want to be looking at air conditioning, hot water and cooking appliances, which are the big energy uses in your home, but also things like your dishwasher, washing machine, fridges, televisions and dryers. And then you can also enhance the energy efficiency of your appliances through the use of smart plugs at home. So you can use timers, but you can also use smart plugs, which can be paired with some of these kind of, what do you call them? Siri, or I don't actually have one myself, so I can't remember the names. But the ones that you can literally just speak and say, oh, you know, please turn off my television PowerPoints, things like that as well, just so you can avoid some additional standby power. So as I said, there is a web page which you can go to, which helps you explore the various appliances and their energy rating. So what's on the screen currently is air conditioners, and some of the air conditioners that will be listed on these screens will only be for cooling, and others are the reverse cycle, so they're heating and cooling. And as you can see, at a glance, it will tell you what the energy rating are for each of them, and your 10-year running costs. You can utilise the tabs on the side here to refine your searches. So you can be looking at ducted, reverse cycle, ducted cooling, and things like that. Reverse cycle, just refrigerated. But it doesn't cover off on evaporative air conditioning. There is no energy rating on them, so it's actually impossible to compare evaporative cooling to other types of cooling, though we do know that evaporative cooling is a reasonably energy efficient way of cooling your home. There are issues with that though, with you've got water running through those, so there's wasted water, and also not always able to be confined to like a small area in the home, so you're actually running cooling for the whole place. And they're pretty terrible to run in humid weather, so even in Perth and the sort of southwest area, some of those summer days get pretty sticky and evaporative doesn't work. So I do encourage you just to get familiar with this web page. You can look at everything from fridges, dryers, washing machines, televisions, pretty much anything that's powered and considered an appliance can be had a look through here. So before you go out and buy anything new, highly recommend that as a tool. So getting on to cooking now, and I will, I guess, preface this little part of the presentation by saying we do hear that getting away from gas for cooking is something that a lot of people don't like the thought of. They feel that cooking is better with gas, and it's like an essential aspect of cooking. Now, in a previous life, I was a chef. I used to love cooking on gas back when I was working in commercial kitchens. And the house that I had prior to this house I'm living in now did have gas cooking, and so it was all I ever knew. Now, when I moved into the house that I'm in currently about 15 years ago, it's a fully electric home. I had very little option but to actually cook on electric cooktop, and I thought, oh, the first thing I'm going to do is get gas plumbed into the house and you know, get a gas cooktop. But almost instantly, I was so impressed by electric cooktop cooking. I just have a ceramic cooktop. I don't have induction cooktop, but the actual temperature control I thought was absolutely phenomenal. And the cooking experience for me was no less. The only thing that perhaps is a little bit different is when you want to cook in a wok, but you can actually get electric woks now. So if you do like a lot of wok cooking, then gas is still not necessary. You can just utilise a electric wok instead. So when we look at the actual costs associated with gas cooktop cooking compared to electric induction, which you know is it's basically it's a magnetic type style of cooking where you need to actually have a type of metal that will relate to the cooktop itself. It doesn't work with all types of cooking equipment, so things like aluminium it will not cook with, but it doesn't actually utilise a lot of electricity, and in fact they're 3 times more energy efficient than gas, and they are 5 to 10% more efficient than standard electric. So Induction cooking is definitely now considered the most energy efficient way of cooking. They do require generally a circuit of their own because they do have slightly higher energy draw needs, but overall the actual energy consumption is far less. If you want to give induction cooking a go, you can buy a induction cooktop hob like this for around about $100 from a electrical retailer and get a bit of a feel for induction cooking through that way. But basically, if you were looking at cost comparisons for daily stovetops, gas cooking is 40 cents, electric induction 31 cents, and that's with 50% solar and battery storage. If you were to be looking at electric induction with the current electricity grid, and same again, this is from about 2021, so that's changed a little bit since then, 30 cents. If you're looking at electric induction with solar and battery now, it's 18 cents. And then in electric induction solar, no stored energy, which means it basically takes out that battery outlay, the cost of the battery, then it's 6 cents. So even though we're talking about, 40 cents a cook or whatever, if you're talking about cooking 2 or 3 times a day and every day for a year, that does add up over time. The other thing to point out is the amount of gas that is just wasted, from that sort of flame throwing out heat. Up to 70% of the energy produced is wasted through that way. So now we're just going to look at vehicles, and I'm not going to cover off on vehicles a great deal. There is actually a couple of workshops coming up which will specifically focus on electric vehicles and charging, and I'll share some details of that a little bit later. But when we're looking at the running costs of vehicles, if you look at a petrol vehicle, for an average Australian driver, it is $2,638 a year. An electric vehicle that is fast charged, which is more expensive than the sort of home charging or slow charging options, is $1,980 a year. If you were to charge a vehicle with grid charging, no solar at all, you're dropping down to $1,087 a year, so more or less than half of what a petrol vehicle will cost you. And also then if you look at electric vehicle charging using solar, drops right down to $89 a year. Great for the people who are working from home or have the ability to charge from home on weekends and things like that. The other thing about electric vehicles you may not be aware of is that the actual maintenance costs of an electric vehicle are far lower than a traditional petrol vehicle, in part because it just has far less parts, like moving parts and things like that. And so it doesn't actually have a lot of things that need to be replaced or repaired. Just got a question here. I'll just wait for the rest of the question to come through for that one. So, yeah, when you're looking at electric vehicle charging, 80% of EV owners are still charging their vehicles at home. This might be a little bit different for people who are living in the regions, who are travelling longer distances, but most people with vehicles are doing 200 kilometres or less in a week, and so charging at home is very viable. You can either trickle charge, which of course is a very slow charge, can take, say, up to 24 hours or more to actually charge a vehicle from 10% up to 80%. But given that most people do a reasonably short trips, then you could get away with trickle charging. They're also very reasonably priced chargers for home, around about $900 to $2,500 for the charger and up to $1,000 for the install, which will dramatically increase your charging rate at home, and then home charging becomes extremely viable. Okay, I've got the rest of that comment now. So the average daily consumption figures given in one of your earlier slides is 102 kilowatt hours a day. However, the average daily consumption at home is 30 kilowatt hours, maximum of 160 kilowatt hours in one day, which has occurred in this financial year. That's interesting. I had a similar issue, but I discovered it to be a fault in my hot water system where the hot water system was leaking. And when that happens, it can be a very, very expensive thing to be occurring. So the fact that you're tracking your usage is good. I'm not sure why it would only happen twice. Yeah, I'd be interested in discussing that a little bit more. So just going on, if your electricity usage is much less than the figures I presented, is it still cost effective to install solar panels, batteries, heat pumps? You're a retired couple and spend regular periods away on travels, but the above figures including charging an EV. Look, I would say yes. I mean, if you're a retired couple and you're at home and you're using 30 kilowatt hours in a day, that's still quite a bit of electricity to be utilising. And so just based on what you've written there, I would say absolutely solar panels would be a very good option for you. Assuming that you are home quite a bit, your ability to actually use that solar energy during the day, utilising things like your washing machines, dishwashers, pool pump if you have a pool, those sorts of things. You've actually very lucky in the fact that you would be at home. Batteries are definitely a great option for people who aren't around during the day to utilise that energy. The other thing is, if you are at home and you do convert to a electric vehicle, then you can actually charge your vehicle during the day and virtually have minimal vehicle costs. So, yeah, I would say it's worth looking into solar panels and batteries. Heat pump, definitely another one. You can get smaller sized tanks, which are cheaper. And there are also some rebates at the moment, not just for solar panels, which you're quite familiar with. There's now rebates on the batteries and heat pumps because they are considered sort of a renewable energy, the fact that they are creating more heat energy than they are utilising. They actually attract a rebate as well. So yes, I would look into it. There are calculators on web pages such as Solar Quotes is a really great one to be having a look at to see if solar panels and batteries are a viable option for you. There's another website called Sunspot, which is another great solar and battery calculator, which will help you get a good understanding of whether or not solar and even electric vehicle is good for your circumstances. It is not a one-size-fits-all sort of argument, but certainly now solar panels are able to generate a lot more electricity than they used to be. So the same amount of space that it required for a single solar panel before, the amount of solar energy that the new ones can generate are much higher. So you can actually, generate a considerable amount of energy off, even a pretty modest house. So do a little bit of research, check out Solar Quotes and even that Sunspot web page, and shop around a little bit in terms of talking to some suppliers and getting a little bit of a sense of what those costs might be for you. Okay. So also the other thing about electric vehicles is that currently there are some fringe benefits tax exemptions, which are great for businesses or people who might be looking to have a novated lease through a business. Basically, it means that you don't pay GST on the actual purchase of the vehicle, and then in a sort of salary sacrifice way, you reduce your tax, but then also you're not attracting fringe benefits tax on top. So I've done a little bit of research in this sort of area, and for somebody on around about $80,000 a year, you could be saving up to about $5,000 in tax per year. And then you've got the added benefits of low running costs and low maintenance costs. The fringe benefits tax exemption came into effect on July 1st, 2022 for new vehicles of a zero or low emissions. So we're talking fully electric vehicles or hydrogen cell vehicles, and for any vehicle that falls in under the luxury car tax, which is around about $90,000 a year. Now, up until April this year, plug-in hybrids, so these are ones which have a petrol engine, but they also have a plug-in battery function, which enables a car to be running on about 100 kilometres or so on a charge. Were eligible, but since April, they've now become not eligible for the fringe benefits tax. And hybrid electric vehicles, which are sort of those ones which have been around for 15 or so years, Toyota's done a lot of those, which are not a plug-in battery option. They basically, internal battery is just charged from the running of the vehicle, braking, and going downhill, and even the motor itself. They are not eligible for that. This can be applied to private vehicles and also, like I said, business vehicles, and more information about that can be found on the ATO website. So another thing that had sort of came into effect, and I didn't cover off on the battery rebates that the Australian government have just announced, and also the Western Australian government have just announced. It might be in a slide coming up in a moment, but essentially the Australian government announced as of 1 July this year, they will provide a rebate for a household solar battery, and it's related to the amount of kilowatt hours that can be stored within that battery, and that will dictate the rebate. At the same time, the Western Australian government provided a rebate called the residential battery household battery scheme. Initially, they said that would be a $5,000 rebate. They have drawn that, sort of pulled that back to expand the amount of people that can qualify for that rebate from, I think it was initially 19,000 people, now it's 100,000 or so can go for that rebate, but also because it complements then the Australian government rebate. So for people living in homes in Western Australia, you can actually get both those rebates. There are some various conditions on the size of the battery, what type of battery, who the suppliers are, and those sorts of things. So it is definitely worth having a look at the information on the West Australian government's website and also the Australian government's website. I'll flick you all some sort of links that you can check out for that. But then at the same time that the Australian government announced the battery rebate, they also launched a household energy upgrade fund. This can be used for renovations, energy upgrades, and also rebuilding when it comes to actually installing things like energy efficient appliances, batteries, and also solar. It's open to households with or without a mortgage, rental property owners and strata properties. High-value properties are excluded, but as I said before about the batteries, the installation and technologies must meet eligibility and evidence requirements. So when you receive these slides, you'll be able to click through to the Household Energy Upgrades Fund webpage to get more information about that. And also a link to the Clean Energy Finance Corporation's finance options. So essentially, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation is the one that is providing the funding for these upgrades. And there are several different sort of loan providers with different types of loans available, which enable, they're not all the same. They don't fund all the same things, and the actual say repayment may be zero, or it may be a small amount. So generally, green loans have a lower interest rate than traditional home loans or personal loans as well. Are the green loans open to renters? Look, as I just said, I think if you have a look at the Clean Energy Finance Corporation's finance options through that link, that'll give you all the options, and they're not all the same. So you would have to look at that. It would say renters, a little bit of a grey area there, and of course, generally some of these things you can't install without permission from the landlord anyway, so you would need to do your research in that respect. So when it comes to disposal of solar panels, batteries and appliances, if you are looking to dispose of these things before the end of life, because it doesn't make sense to say maintain a 30-year-old fridge that may be quite poor in its energy efficiency, and so looking to replace that with an energy efficient fridge instead, but it still has a bit of life for somebody else, or even a washing machine, some of these other things. I wouldn't be looking to dispose of these in a landfill or transfer station or anything else. The first port of call would be to have a look at, say, Facebook Marketplace or Gumtree or some of those other things. But if you utilise Facebook, you may also be familiar with Buy Nothing pages. So Buy Nothing communities are sort of micro Buy Nothing pages where it's confined to your local area, usually around about up to 1,000 people in that sort of each group. And Western Australia is actually the largest user of Buy Nothing groups. So it's an initiative that started in the US quite some years ago now. But if you were to go to the Buy Nothing page and have a look at how many Buy Nothing groups there are in Western Australia, it is a significant amount compared to pretty much anywhere else in the world. And so a great thing to join, not just for disposing or even getting secondhand appliances at no cost, but for a variety of other items. I've got some really great bargains over the years, including things that if I was to buy them new would cost me well in excess of $2,000. So yes, I do recommend that you check that out if you aren't already on a Buy Nothing page. Now, solar panels and batteries, of course, are one of those e-waste items that is the fastest growing waste stream globally. And it is predicted that by 2047, there will be 1 million tonnes of solar panel waste. Now, there are parts of the solar panel currently that cannot be recycled, and that's generally the photovoltaic cells, just because of their sort of composition, unable to be sort of broken down. But 95% of the solar panel can be recycled. And already in Perth, there are some businesses that will accept old panels, inspect them and resell them. Even a 25-year or 30-year solar panel can have still 85% of its effectiveness. So these sorts of things, even though they've gone beyond past their sort of perceived life, still can be valuable to others. And it is worth having a look if you do have a very old solar panel system, to consider replacing it with a new system, just because, as I said before, your actual panels these days generate so much more solar power than the old ones, and some of the older systems may have only been a 1 or 3 kilowatt system, where the average solar panel system now is a 6.6 kilowatt system or above. And so if you were to replace an old system now, your payback period would be very short and you would be generating more solar as well. So apart from that, there are some businesses within Western Australia, certainly some in the Perth area, which do take solar panels for recycling. And with the recent e-waste bans that have come into effect in Western Australia, you can expect more of these kind of disposal options to, become more widespread over the next few years as well. Batteries actually are, the components in batteries are reasonably easy to recycle, and so those sorts of things are certainly not wasted. The other thing you'd be wanting to do is to check your local government's waste and recycling webpage to get familiar with what it is that you can do, where you can take things in your local area as well. Always the first port of call when it comes to any sort of waste and recycling in your local area. So just finally, some useful resources to sort of extend upon what I've provided you tonight. I mean, this is really just an introductory workshop on the theme of electrification. If you are on Facebook and are not already part of the My Efficient Electric Home Facebook page, it's a very large community with lots and lots of useful information. Plenty of Western Australia people on that web Facebook page. So get some really great insights on what's going on in Western Australia and what works in these conditions. Tim Forsey, who started the My Efficient Electric Home Facebook page, has also recently released a book called My Efficient Electric Home Handbook. The Australian government has a digital and print version of a Your Home Guide, so that's this one here. And that covers off on solar panels, energy efficiency, all sorts of things. Definitely, if you're doing any sort of home renovations or building, you want to be checking that out. And I've already mentioned Rewiring Australia on a couple of occasions this evening. Saul Griffith, who was the founder of Rewiring Australia and also Rewiring America prior to that, he is the author of a few books. Big Switch came out a couple of years ago, and just very recently a new handbook called Plug In. Saul is actually speaking in Melville tomorrow. If you are able to go and listen to him, he's very inspiring, and the work that Rewiring Australia in general is doing is extremely inspiring stuff. Now, I will send you out, this is just to help you think about what it is you can be doing in your home to transition and get some sort of idea of the approximate costs, the average lifespan of things. So I can send out this spreadsheet to you, which you can either print out and write in manually, or you can actually import figures into the cells. But this will get you started to think about, what sort of equipment you already have in your home, what you could be replacing it with, and then when you may need to either save towards, or sort of set out your replacements in a manner which is strategic and also won't be a massive cost burden all in one go if you are choosing not to finance. And I did mention before that we've got some other workshops coming up. This should say understanding EVs understanding EVs and charging systems, not solar panels. There is a in-person workshop in Melville on Saturday, 27th of September at 10 a.m. And there's also an online workshop on Thursday, 9th of October at 6 p.m. The links to those are embedded within the slides that I'll send out to you, but you can also go to Switch Your Thinking's Eventbrite page or our website where we've got an events page. And recently we did a solar panels workshop, which is recorded and on our YouTube channel. So there's your link there as well for that. One final thing I just wanted to cover off on is energy audit kits. If you're interested in exploring your energy use at home and see where you might be able to reduce energy costs, you are able to learn energy audit kits from more than 100 libraries or community resource centres throughout Western Australia. They contain a thermal camera, which enables you to sort of check your insulation, have a look at drafts and cold spots around the home, or even hot spots if we're talking about summer. It will enable you to check the power consumption of a number of household appliances, check your hot water temperature so you can set that at an appropriate and energy efficient temperature, and also water flow tests, because when we're talking about hot water, of course, you want to have sort of water efficient tapware and shower heads to minimise your energy use. There's also a very comprehensive instruction manual that comes with that, which runs through safety instructions. It gives you a number of tests and also some prompts as to what action you can take to reduce energy use. We have printable observation sheets which can be found on our website, and we also have a recorded instructional video which goes for about 9 minutes on our website, which will help get you familiar with how to use the equipment and what you should be looking for.